Sure. Well, it is great to see people today. I was thinking this morning, as my shower inspiration was now remembering that um, I used to be inspired by great speeches, great talks. Um, I believed that when I was in grade school, I learned from Abraham Lincoln that our government was of, by, and for the people, and I believed it. When I was in high school, I heard from Ben Franklin that we have a republic if we can keep it, and I believed it. In college, I was totally turned on by Alexis de Tocqueville, who believed that we had a culture of voluntary association, and I really believed that. And
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 partially
I
named your daughter after.
yeah, and I did partially name my daughter after Alexis de Tocqueville, Samantha Alexis Shireman. So, yes. So I believed it, and I felt so inspired by the words of others that I thought it would be such a privilege if I could express words in a way that would affect others as much as I have been affected. And I see this leadership circle community as a community where we all have that opportunity. I know that someone's life will be changed as a consequence of our conversation today. Someone will live a different life, a better life, because of a conversation, an idea, a person you meet, so on, that will happen today, starting now. So let me hand this to Doozy to welcome us in, and then we'll start the leadership circle.
Great, thanks, Bill. So I see a lot of familiar faces today. This will be probably very familiar, but welcome to Practicing Democracy Without Permission, today's meeting of the Leadership Circle. If you are new, the Leadership Circle is a forum for a diverse group of stakeholders to learn, build relationships, and collaborate around around solutions for a healthy environment and democracy. Whoops.
We have these 10 kinds of people in the leadership community here, and we try to get as many of them covered each time because these 10 types of people have 10 different kinds of power. And when that power comes together, it's catalytic. It is synergetic. It has a greater than whole impact. And so that's what we're aiming for here.
We start every meeting by declaring a set of terms of engagement, which were adapted from Joan Blades and Living Room Conversations.
Who
They
is
are
right here today? Thank you, Joan.
They are here. They are relatively self-explanatory. Be curious and open to learning. Show respect and suspend judgment in these meetings. We look for common ground. We welcome everyone to show up in an authentic way and welcome that from others. Also, our time is limited, so we welcome everyone to be purposeful and to the point, and also to really participate and own and guide the conversation. We also have a set of 4 guiding principles that describe how we approach our work, which are no demons, no denials, no excuses, no delays. This work is urgent. We must start now.
And we adopt the method and the philosophy of proactivism. We are not against each other. We are for what we share in common. And so, as a community, we advance 2 objectives, a healthy environment and a healthy democracy. And we are in the process of launching a new project, Circle, that will advance a circular economy and society that exemplifies this with policies and market changes and a culture and community that actually engages in ways that change and enhance our community. So there'll be a lot more that we'll talk about with regard to that.
Well, Bill, it is over to you. Can you tell us, today we're here talking about democracy, which is related to the blog and podcast you've been writing and participating in. Why did you start writing about dark MAGA, and what do you hope we accomplish today?
Well, I started writing about dark MAGA when I realized that 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 many of us have been caught by the totalitarian temptation, and that some people have enormous amounts of money and enormous amounts of power to advance that temptation. When I was in college, what I feared most politically was totalitarianism. Uh, we talk about authoritarianism, but authoritarianism in its most severe form is totalitarianism. That is when the government has control of the means of communication between people. That is a form of authoritarianism that is more total, hence totalitarianism, than any other. And I realized a few years ago that we have fallen into that trap here in the US. I used to look at the Soviet Union and China as the instigators of totalitarianism, but we've fallen into a different kind of form of it, where instead of having one government-sponsored media, we have two media that divide people in two. It's even more severe because we don't have an official media. We have two false media narratives that keep us apart and make our government dysfunctional. Because of that dysfunctionality, a lot of people feel that we face existential problems that we cannot deal with. And on the left and the right, I see people jumping to the conclusion that we just can't afford democracy right now. My friend Bill McKibben believes we can't afford democracy with regard to climate change. We need to step forward with changes, and they need to be imposed because climate change is so severe. I understand that impulse. On the right, we've seen that impulse carried forward in a ruthless way in the last few years. And it is a subject of great concern. Within the right, there are several movements that have caught the totalitarian temptation. One in particular is what calls itself Dark MAGA. These are what Steve Bannon calls derisively the broligarchs. And and Bannon, believe it or not, is on the opposite side from the broligarchs. The broligarchs are a set of billionaires that aim to shift America from a democracy to a monarchy, a technology monarchy, and and they have a credible plan to do that. And I think it is a genuine risk. Our approach to countering that is not to fight it, not to battle it, because that will simply divide America again, but to demonstrate democracy, to practice democracy, and to practice democracy without permission, by which I mean we don't have to wait for government to solve the problem for us or even demand that government pass laws or change the Constitution. Our best approach is to practice democracy. And we have with us some leaders in that process who are going to, and we're going to engage with in a few minutes after we get to know each other a little better in the process. So I will wait a moment to describe Lauren Babcock of Healthy Democracy, Marjan Ehsassi from FIDE North America, Paul Zeitz from Unify USA, and Rahmin Sarabi and Clara Long from Bloom and American Public Trust. I'll give you a little bit more on their background after we engage with each other and begin to say those things that are going to enhance our lives and our effectiveness. Well, welcome back, everybody. That was a great group. We always do. I hope everybody found that your group was surprisingly serendipitous. They usually are. Doozy, are we just diving in here? Should I introduce our guests?
Please do.
Okay. Well, we went through the five that are joining us from four different entities a little bit ago. We're going to have each one of them are going to present for about 5 minutes, talk about what they do, and I may push in a question or so in that, and then we'll go to the next one. So we've got about 20 some minutes
Yeah.
for conversations. Lauren Babcock, you are the program director of Healthy Democracy, and you create citizen panels, civic assemblies that are aimed at gathering citizens together in democratic process to actually develop solutions. Can you give us a bit about what's distinctive about the approach that Healthy Democracy takes, and why is it so important right now in America's time frame?
Absolutely. I'm gonna share my screen, assuming I always share the right one. We will see and do this. Okay. Can you see my
Yep,
slideshow?
Again.
got
Awesome.
it.
So I think the biggest beautiful thing about the work that we do with civic assemblies is that it is, to me, the epitome of government for the people, by the people, and of the people. A little bit of background about Healthy Democracy. We've been around since 2007. We started with the CIR in Oregon, which was one of the first institutionalized deliberative processes in the US, and have since transferred to working on civic assemblies across the country, focusing on local governments, local municipalities, and others to mainly use democratic lotteries and deliberative processes to get people deeply involved in democracy. So to start with, the biggest issue that we see in politics is representation. We don't see people who look like us. We don't see people who look like our neighbors, our families. And most specifically, we don't see or hear from people who have the same lived experience as us. And when we do have opportunities to participate, we depend almost entirely on self-selected volunteerism, which is open in theory, but there are a lot of restrictions. And so not everybody is really able to participate in the avenues that we do have for democracy. And whether we blame the system, the individuals, the outcome is the same. Most of us are not represented. We're not participating. We're not in it. Some of us don't even know what it means to be an active participant in democracy. So we at Healthy Democracy want people to have real power. We want it to be deep. We want it to be deliberative. And we want it to be more than just supporting or opposing ideas that have already been developed and kind of outsourced to others. Enter civic assemblies. So what is a civic assembly? You will also hear this called a citizens assembly, a citizen jury, or policy juries. We use the term civic assembly at Healthy Democracy. So this is a group of residents who are selected by lottery, and they are demographically representative of their community. They come together for sometimes 2 weekends, sometimes 7 weekends, sometimes they're institutionalized and they're ongoing, and they deliberate and collaborate on a chosen policy topic. Ultimately, they become experts on whatever this policy topic is, and they deliver recommendations directly to the local government, so the local city council, county commissioners, whoever it is. So what makes this different, first and foremost, is, well, it's who is in the room is different, what we do in the room is different, and how we do it is different. So the people who are delegates of a civic assembly, they're selected by lottery. We send out thousands of invitations to households that are selected completely at random within the geographic area that we're working with. It could be a city, a county, a state. People who are interested can respond, and then they are entered into a lottery, and we select a panel of 20 to 30 to 50, depending on the assembly. And we also give them a stipend for their time and reimbursements for transportation, for childcare, to really lower those barriers for entry and make it so democracy can work for everybody. And what's really key here is the in-depth deliberation. They have a lot of time to learn. They have a lot of time to do information gathering, analysis, to talk to each other, to talk to local stakeholders and experts. And then they make decisions by supermajority. We never force consensus, but those supermajority recommendations are then delivered directly to a government entity. So a lot of benefits here. I'm going to skip over this, I think, because I have a lot to talk about, not a lot of time. So the recent work that we've done in healthy democracy, our most recent civic assemblies, the last one was in Fort Collins, Colorado, the Hughes Civic Assembly in 2025. This was a land use issue. It was very contentious what to do with the prior Colorado State University football stadium. We had 20 delegates selected by lottery. They worked together for 4 days. 2024, we did the Deschutes Civic Assembly on youth homelessness. This was in Central Oregon, and the topic was preventing and ending youth homelessness. We had 30 delegates that got together and deliberated over 5 days. And in 2022, we did the Petaluma Civic Assembly, which is the longest deliberative process or assembly in the U.S. to date, as far as we know. So this was another land use issue, and then we had 36 delegates and 12 days of work that spanned 6 to 7 weeks. Currently, we have a lot of potential assemblies on the table. New Hampshire Together has some awesome opportunities. Unify America is doing great work in Ohio. Multiple major cities in California are at various stages of approving an assembly. So the beginning of 2026 is looking really promising. And American Public Trust, Rahmin, who you'll hear from, and then the National Coalition for Dialogue and Deliberation, Marjan is with us today. They've been doing a lot of advocacy to get another assembly in Colorado and have a long-term vision to have multiple assemblies there. We're also going to be doing a lot of field building. For us, that looks like advocacy trainings, moderation trainings for civic assemblies, and also process design training so people can learn how to plan assemblies themselves. There are a lot of practitioners and there's a lot of interest popping up across the US without a lot of expertise for how to design an assembly. We're also very interested in extending relationships and partnerships to right-leaning electeds, organizations, and communities. This is really essential for the resiliency of the movement as a whole. And right now, the biggest roadblock is funding. So we're also really interested in working on building relationships with funders and within the philanthropic network. So that is my brief spiel about civic assemblies and the work that Healthy Democracy is doing. We have a lot going on. 2026 is looking very exciting for us.
Thank you. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Lauren. And I have one quick question for you, and that is how, we see a lot of folks on the center to left who are involved in the citizen assembly movement, but not as many on the right, as you note. How are you finding it attracting folks from the center to the right?
I think it's been very difficult, and it's really a matter of building the one-on-one relationships with them. Mm-hmm. It's direct outreach and direct relationship building, because for whatever reason, they aren't quite as attracted to the spirit of civic mm-hmm. assemblies. And so, yeah, very direct outreach.
Great. Well, mm-hmm. that's a topic we'll dive into in perhaps here today and definitely in the future. I'm going to turn to Marjan Ehsassi, the executive director at FIDE North America. That's the Federation for Innovation in Democracy. You are aiming to, and I love this about your work, embed citizen deliberation inside democratic institutions. It's one of the specialties that you focus on so that you can assure that these processes actually have an impact. They're not just for show. They're embedded in local government. Tell us how you do your work, and how do you create not just a one-time success, but a culture for citizen engagement?
Thank you, Bill. It's great to be here. It's really a pleasure. I want to thank you, Bill, and also Ducey for having us together, as well as the other panelists or the other presenters who are with me today. I thought before I try, so FIDE North America is a relatively new organization. We were set up last April, so we've been around for about 1.5 years, which is quite new. I thought maybe before I talk a little bit more about FIDE in the 5 minutes that I have, maybe I could just sort of take a step back and we could just talk a little bit about why is it that citizens' assemblies are sort of potentially a really good solution for some of the problems we're having. And the way that because I think it's important for all of us to be a little bit more grounded and to frame the solution around the problem that we're trying to solve. So for us at FIDE, when we talk about democratic deficits, we're usually talking about one of three problems. The very first one is the lack of accountability. So, for Americans especially, because I do feel that this is especially an American issue. It's an international issue, but it's one that in the U.S. People, when you ask them about their voice, they think about their vote. So every 4 years we're asked to vote, and then that's it. There are very few ways to be able to hold government accountable. So that lack of space in between elections for people to be able to hold their government accountable is one part of the problem that we find. And so we are trying to create these spaces so that people can be more meaningfully involved in government decision making. The second piece is the responsiveness, which is, when you look at the data, more and more people feel sort of alienated from policy. So we're asking Americans across the country to observe, to sort of obey rules, regulations that they don't really feel are aligned with their preferences. So that kind of that distance between people's preferences and government decision making and policy reform is a second piece that I think is really important. And then the third, which is the lack of inclusion and the lack of voices and the lack of the voices of the people that we rarely hear from, is another really big part of this, which is the sortition piece that Lauren so wonderfully took us through. And I think, to be honest, and I'll talk about this a little bit more, I think that the lack of marginalized voices at the table is one that is becoming one that at least the electeds that we talk to are recognizing more and more. So in terms of FIDE, what do we do? So when we started, we really wanted to try to be additive and to sort of create a place and offerings that were not being offered by other organizations. And so the three things that we talk about quite often and kind of our services and our offerings are anchored around are training, designing, and evaluating. So on the training part, we have capacity building schools, and many of the partners on the call have been involved in our capacity building schools. We had one in Washington last year, another one in Phoenix. This year, we have started doing place-based schools. So we actually go to schools where there is interest in a citizens assembly, and we provide them with more training. So that allows us to bring people who are not only supportive of assemblies, but also some who might be skeptical of assemblies in a room over 2 days to be able to sort of build their capacity and answer questions that they may have. So that's our training part. On the design piece, it's really kind of macro design. So what we are doing, and this is something that this past year has become evident, is that a lot of cities will reach out to us and say, help us, take us through this process. And so while there will be great implementers like Healthy Democracy that will come, and Unify, of course, that will help them design and implement, we will play that ongoing technical guidance role. And so in 2026, we'll be playing that role of ongoing technical guidance for Akron, Ohio, for Dayton, Ohio, as well as Snohomish, Washington State. So these are all assemblies that are going to start in 2026. And then the third piece of the work that we do that is hopefully being seen as very additive is our evaluations. So for assemblies that are happening, we will do independent evaluations, which means that we will hire someone on the ground, generally a PhD student in the locality, like we just did one for Boulder, Colorado. We worked with the University of Colorado at Boulder. We hired a PhD student who used our methodology to do both quantitative and qualitative data sort of gathering, to then write a case study, which I'm currently reviewing. It's about 110 pages long, and our evaluations are becoming longer and longer. But hopefully over time, this body of case studies and independent evaluations will give us some of the comparative data that I think the field really needs to be able to think about impact. And then just really quickly, the way that we're working currently is, and this is where I think it's really important for the conversation that we're having, is that even over the past year and a half, instead of us going out and trying to sell this, we are seeing more and more that cities are coming and saying, we want to learn more about this. And so we currently have a pipeline of about 30 cities that have shown interest, that we're working with at different levels. Some of them are just very sort of just beginning to learn about this. Some of them are wanting us to design and to sort of connect them with implementers that are doing this work. And some cities want to do this on their own as well, which I think there should be space for. And then to answer your question, Bill, about sort of left and right, we just launched this summer an initiative to bring governors together around citizens' assemblies. So we are very excited. We will launch this in January, and we're working with a very small cohort of,
Hmm.
we currently have four, but we're hoping that we have six governor's offices that will be part of this program. And they are bipartisan. So it's a mix of Republican
And
and Democrats.
is the Utah governor going to be among those?
Yes, the
Yeah.
Utah governor has not signed the MOU yet, but
Uh-huh.
I'm pretty sure that they'll be part of it. We're insisting on a pretty strict memorandum of understanding. I think it's
That's
my
great.
lawyer's hat, but yes, they have expressed their interest.
That's great. Well, I have a question about your third, the third problem that you're trying to address, the lack of inclusion. When we
Mhm.
have a population that feels that government isn't accountable and they feel alienated, how do you differentiate between groups that feel excluded? It seems like the entire, Trump and MAGA movement was driven in significant measure by a sense on the part of half the population, or maybe, a quarter of the population, that they were excluded, that they were, set aside and forgotten. And Donald Trump is their finger to some degree to the rest of the community. How do we include everyone who feels excluded as we reach out to marginalized communities?
Well, so I think you ask a very good question, and I'm not sure that we have a perfect answer for it. We just published a report a month ago called Voice Insecurity, which speaks to not just, I think, people on the right, but also people on the left. I think everyone feels like their voice doesn't matter. I mean, even people who go to town halls and even people who respond to surveys feel that at the end, well, what does it really mean, right? I think it's not a question about like being able to write an article or having outlets that will allow you on television to be part of the process. It's about that kind of sense of meaningful input. And so I do think it's a problem across I think sort of ideological viewpoints. Um, I mean, what we try to do with citizens' assemblies is what Lauren was describing is the sortition piece. So what we do at least is we send out these letters to 7 to 10,000 people, whether it's in a country, like I was working in France on a national assembly, or in a city. We send those out and we're hoping that the response, the volunteers who respond and are sort of show interest in being part of an assembly, we then use sort of different criteria to make sure that they're representative. And I will say that in the data that we have, the research that we've done, you typically, because these processes are still voluntary, right, there is a self-selection bias. And, we are told and we do believe and we acknowledge that sortition on a voluntary basis is not perfect. But what we typically will find is people who are responding and wanting to volunteer because they're just generally more engaged. So
Mhm.
to your question, we're not really addressing the more marginalized voices through that. But then there are people who are not usually active, but are very interested in the issue. So
Yeah.
they will respond. And then there is always a group of people, and that group becomes larger in countries that are doing more and more assemblies. But there's this percentage of people who will say, I have never been asked to provide this kind of feedback. I
Mhm.
haven't voted in 15 years. I
Yeah.
don't belong to political parties. And so we are getting to that group of people who are generally disengaged, but who see this as a very, very innovative and novel way to provide input.
And finally, very quickly, how do you said you've got memos of understanding with the governors, for example. How do
Yes.
you assure that government then takes the findings and conclusions seriously and acts on them?
I mean, personally, for FIDE, we will not be involved in any process where the government champion at the beginning of the process doesn't clearly establish feedback mechanisms. Like, I will not be part of a process where we don't have a government mandating body or a champion, and that government body has not made it clear that they will commit to reviewing the recommendations within 6 months, 9 months, and responding.
Great, great. I think that's something I want to come back to and hear from others as well. I'm going to move to Paul Zeitz, the co-founder at Unify USA. And Paul, you advocate a People's Assembly model, and you are also pressing for a refreshed constitutional framework, a systems upgrade of our Constitution. It sounds like I'd love to hear more more of that. And tell us a bit about the work that you do. What's distinctive about it from the work that we've heard about from Marjan and Lauren?
Great. Thank you so much, Bill. And thanks for these convenings. I've learned so much on them as I've been able to participate this year. It's a hard act to follow Lauren and Marjan, two leaders in the civic and citizens assembly movement, and so many friends and leaders on the call here, like Rahmin and Walt Roberts and so many others. So it's truly an honor to be here. Unify USA, we birthed ourselves in January this year as a C3, C4 mechanism to respond to the threat that we're facing with the current government. And we share, I guess, Bill, your view that we are in the midst of an authoritarian project being implemented by MAGA Project 2025. It is moving with great velocity. It is moving, and if it follows the pattern of other regimes of this nature, it will continue to accelerate into full election capture and also try to rewrite the rules of the government so that they can entrench their rule potentially for decades. And so in response to that possibility, and I hope I'm wrong, believe me, I hope more than anything in the world that I'm completely wrong. But we set up Unify USA to enter into the democracy space and to understand the ecosystems as they're rapidly evolving now. And our vision is to imagine and unlock political imagination for recreating, refreshing, reconstructing our democracy from a dark money-driven democracy to a citizen-centered, citizen-driven democracy. And the tools that you heard from Lauren and Marjan are a big part of the puzzle, but there's also the breakthrough with AI and digital deliberation technologies that are now going to scale around the world. Not in the United States necessarily yet, but they're starting to go further to scale around the world. And then linking
why is it that they're scaling around the world, but not in the US?
Well, there's some efforts here. There was America One Room that many people heard about.
Yeah.
They just did an America One Room in Pennsylvania as another example of it. But they now have a technology that they're applying in other parts of the world that they're involving thousands of citizens, not just a small group of people.
A new, but then I have another one. All day.
And then, looking at the deliberative world and then looking at the fundamental root cause of our, the collapse of our democracy, I think there's a widening understanding now that we have to strengthen our Constitution. At a minimum, we have to prevent fascism from ever happening again. That's the minimum. And so there's many groups now. There's Democracy 2076. There's Constitutional Collaborative of think tanks and academics and many other stakeholders that are all revving up because we expect there'll be a window or windows that are going to be opening in the near term, the next 1 to 3 years, where refreshing the Constitution is going to be on the table.
It will probably be, we'll face a crisis at some point where the Constitution is either renewed or it is gutted. And we're going to need to be, I agree, we're going to need to have something very well thought out in hand with a lot of folks having been involved in it that can move forward, because otherwise it's just too easy to just say, hey, our Constitution is 250 years old. We've just celebrated it. Thank you very much. We're moving on.
Exactly. And a lot of, I was being laughed out of rooms a year ago and told I was crazy. And now a lot of people are talking about this and a lot of people are like digging in on it. And that's the goal. This is a big opportunity for all of us to imagine what we want to create together. And so I did put a blog in here called 3 Paths to Renew American Democracy. There are 3 pathways that I think all need to be implemented. One is an offensive defense, blocking what MAGA might do to rewrite the Constitution directly. Then there's Democracy 2076 has 25 amendments that they believe need to be considered by the American public. And they want to use Congress and the states, the current mechanisms of Article 5 in the Constitution. And while I hope all those pathways work, we also have a plan B in case they don't, which is to advocate for massive citizen mobilization, a supermajority. We believe we can get up to 80% of the public. We are working with principled Republicans. We are working with independents. We are working with Democrats and liberals. And so it is a broad spectrum recognition. Now, we don't all agree, and that's okay. We're not trying to all agree, but that's why we have these deliberation modalities that can be brought to scale and quickly. And so we're working on launching a Renew American Democracy strategy, and to really intensify with Walt Roberts and IMIP and the Democracy Renewal Group and the Trust Network and many other networks to create a conversation and do consultations about how the American people want to amend the Constitution and other aspects of reforming our democracy. And I do want to shout out Dan Marks, who's on the call today. He's a leading light out there in Iowa, who is holding the first citizens convenings December 28th and January 3rd to invite the people of Iowa to put forward their ideas. And then he has a platform, a tech platform, to get people to share the ideas and vote on them so that we can start to see what the American people really want. We also are working with Celinda Lake and Republican pollster Christine Matthews from Bellwether to do political polling on what the public wants to see in a refreshed Constitution. So that's a proposal and an initiative that's being reviewed by some key stakeholders, and we're hoping that will go forward as well as part of this process.
I know one of the things that I've learned over time, to my continual shock, I suppose, is that when I actually talk to folks who are clearly opponents of mine in certain respects, I always find these areas of passionate agreement as well. And Steve Bannon recently, and I think probably pretty frequently, but for the first time that I saw it, absolutely condemned the broligarchs, the Peter Thiel's and Elon Musk's and the other billionaires that are advocating a technology monarchy. And so on that, we're seeing differentiation in the MAGA movement. Now we have, we've seen it just in the last few days, differentiation, regarding the Epstein files. When you speak of MAGA as, we want to avoid or defend ourselves against the MAGA, threat, how do you differentiate between the different components of MAGA? Do you define MAGA as one thing, or are there components within the MAGA community that we can have a conversation with to bring them into the process so that they feel represented?
That's a great question. First of all, there is a leaving MAGA movement out there where there's a healing and support for those that want to leave MAGA. I encourage you to meet with those folks. They're really interesting. MAGA is not unified. There are the tech oligarchs and the elite power brokers that are doing this for their incentives. There's Christian nationalists that are doing it for their reasons. And then there are people who are attracted to a populist message that is like to break and destroy the status quo because it ain't working for people. And so our movement to renew American democracy has to answer that question about how are we going to help them improve their lives. And that's why everyone's fed up with the current political party system, because they know that neither of them are solving the problems. And that's why 47% of Americans are independent, and the parties are hemorrhaging. And they're minority parties. They're 25 and 25% of the public. So, we shouldn't assume that we're still in the duopoly. The duopoly still controls the political system, but the public is not part of that.
The public is not.
And so we have to recreate now. We have to reimagine what's possible, in my view. Now, I crossed over and went to a MAGA conference held by the Convention of States in September. I was the only one from this center right or center or left that was there, as far as I could identify. And it was really interesting. And I would say that the leadership elites are part of the leadership elites that are high on the hog of running the government. They got their Project 2025 and they're all running the government. They're gloating. And the Christian nationalists there were gloating as well. But when I talked to the people that were at the conference, the real grassroots, they're just like us. They have grandchildren, they have dogs, they want to see a better America. They were nice people. And I felt like the key is that if we are successful in putting forward a positive agenda to renew American democracy that's really going to deliver, as Walt says, thriving communities, all those elements of that positive agenda, then I think we can invite them in to help us co-create this. And like Marjan and Lauren said, we will have to have MAGA in the room. By sortition-based processes, they are automatically in the room. And of course, we want them there. We want to hear from them.
And we want them in the leadership too. Some of them, because if they're not there, they're going to be a mob. People are
but we also have to have a line in the sand. We have to have a line in the sand, Bill. I do believe we have to believe in equal under the law for all people. Some basic tenets.
Of course. MAGA is a word. And of course, if you're in one community, you interpret the word one way. If you're in another community, you interpret it a different way. But I think, there are folks on the right who tell me we cannot deal with any progressives. That's the red line. Because of here's what progressives are. I mean, you talk to a progressive and they say, well, that's not what I am. It's like, but so I think there are people who define themselves as MAGA, but who are not MAGA as you might define, or we might define MAGA. Anyway, we better move on. Let me move to, and thank you, Paul, for everything that you're doing. Rahmin Sarabi, the founder of American Public Trust, and Clara Long, who are going to talk about the Bloom Project. You are talking about practical citizen assemblies, and you're also interested in a democracy upgrade of sorts. I'm interested in, of course, the approach that you take. And do you agree with Paul that we need a constitutional upgrade? Is that in the offing? Tell us about the work that you're doing with Bloom Project and American Public Trust, and how it adds to the puzzle here as we try to recover our American democracy.
Thanks, Bill. I'll just quickly introduce myself and hand over to Rahmin. My name is Clara Long. I'm the co-lead of Bloom and a longtime human rights lawyer. I'm based in Oakland. I spent years trying to move change from the outside, and I've been pulled into building a movement for what we call uncommon ground, the common ground we didn't know we had, the uncommon ground problem solving that can let people lead directly. So I'm thrilled to be co-building this with my colleague Rahmin Sarabi, who many of you know, and has been at the heart of catalyzing citizens' assemblies in the US and an advisor to Engage to California, which is an online platform that makes it easier for Californians to have a voice in government. And he's going to briefly outline what we're doing with Bloom, how we're partnering with communities and technologists to practice democracy without permission. So Rahmin, over to you.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Bill, Marjan, Lauren, Paul. I'll frame it as in true deliberative fashion. This is a yes and. This is hopefully a complementary set of tools and capacities that can amplify and lift up the work that's going on. I'll share some slides as we'll get into. This is our first public presentation on Bloom. This project was recently funded, and we're thrilled. And it's a little bit of the dog that caught the bus metaphor. Now we're running to catch up to the bus and live into the promise. As a high level framing, you can think of Bloom as some of what, Paul, you were naming, that AI enabled civic operating system that can empower a lot of this broader public deliberation that so far that potential hasn't been realized. I would argue globally as well, right? We've got early demonstrations. Bottom line, it's so we can get out of that polarization, the trap, the illusion of polarization, into a politics of uncommon ground and post-partisan problem solving. I think the problem statement has been well named here by many, and we know it in our bones. We'll just anchor as, in a mundane sense, you could say this is about upgrading our capacity for public problem solving. Yes, that, if you think about it, means we need to upgrade how we do democracy. But the issues from the voicelessness that Marjan has spoken eloquently about, the polarization, the incentives around divisiveness. And we haven't really gotten into the fact that we're in a world of, call it polycrisis, metacrisis. We're at a time that is demanding great change and transition, and our systems are not up to the task of navigating complexity at the speed, scale, and depth of the challenges that we face. So Bloom, in a nutshell, is an upgraded piece of infrastructure for understanding our problems, building agreement, taking action together. It's at this intersection of our slight reframe on AI is not artificial intelligence, but assistive intelligence that can support us in coming together and having the sorts of conversations at a scale that just wasn't possible before. There's a lot going on in this slide. I just want to name in the language of citizen assemblies, we often describe them as mini publics. And again, it's a representative group of 30 to 200 folks. There's this longing for the maxi public to be more engaged, to have voice in a substantive way, and also have a taste of that transformative experience of what happens in the room in the assemblies, which again is a feeling of belonging, a feeling that my voice mattered, a feeling that I was part of making change. I have agency, and I have agency with other members of my community. I'm not alone here. That's what's in this, slightly white outline section in the agenda setting, problem definition, broad collective dialogues. I kind of call it deliberation light, the opportunities for, a different type of town hall, whether that's that's a later slide again. First, whether that's in person, and I'm sure we're all there. There may be a few AI transcribers on this call right now. I'm going to wager a guess. Some of what's newly possible in the last 12 months, which again was part of prototyping in the state of California through Engage California. Some of what we did in even Fort Collins was taking lots of long form inputs from the public that before it would have been impossible, too expensive for us to harvest and synthesize in the ways we did before. Now it can be done, semi-instantaneously. I'm not here to be Pollyanna about the need for humans in the loop and the hallucinations, but it is game changing. So now you can have, you can track your voice, your fingerprint in that conversation ostensibly, down the block to the conclusions of the citizen assembly and see how you were part of shaping that conclusion. And then coming back to driving impact, well, now you're building inside-outside power. Now you've got voice from the public that is invested in driving the conclusions. It's not just dependent on the goodwill of the electeds. Because as we've seen in many cases globally, when the recommendations are misaligned with power elites, they do tend to get ignored. So this is an inside-outside power infrastructure. Of course, the other side is more obvious to imagine. Digital async broad engagements are newly possible. This is to say, this isn't new, this project. We're not building things completely from scratch, but this is an integrative effort to take the emerging set of tools, put them together in a cohesive platform that's accessible for community organizers, process designers, and leaders, that actually feels delightful to use. Building web products is expensive and hard, and can deliver this sense of clarity on the other side in terms of collective wisdom.
Can I ask a question, Rahmin?
Yes.
On that last slide, you say that the Taiwan experience led public trust in government to go from 9% to 70% in 6 years. That's an extraordinary change.
That's right.
Is that for the public as a whole? That it's not just the participants in the process, or was it the public?
For the public as a whole, for the public as a whole. So the Taiwan case is an interesting one. It was the equivalent of their Occupy Wall Street movement, the Sunflower movement. Happened a few years after the waves in the US. And the big learning they had is like, wait, they weren't able to distill into clear, let's say, demands or policy positions. And they had a civic hacker movement in Taiwan that they were able to leverage. So in 3 weeks, 500,000 people participated, including completely online and a number in an occupation of parliament. It yielded 30 demands that when the government saw them, They said, "Oh, these make a lot of sense. We're going to adopt all of them."
No way.
And yeah, and then it led to the starting of the uh, digital ministry in Taiwan. Audrey Tang, who's globally famous for the work and is a collaborator with us on the project, then went and remade the culture of participatory policymaking from the inside out. And again, a lot of credit to Audrey's transformative leadership. It's not just technology in that sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
We can wrap and we'll get into a group discussion here. So.
Yeah, I'll land the plane and say, and we're collaborating and trying to build from others' work. I want to call out Liz Berry and Stuart Lynn of CrownShy and MetaGov that basically are shepherding the open source platform that's interoperable across all these emerging deliberative tools. And then Audrey Tang's leadership, amongst others. For 2026, we're orienting in kind of two branches. One is major headline demonstrations, and there may be collaborative opportunities on this call we should be exploring. We're imagining topics like youth, social media, and mental health, potentially statewide level across a few states, cascading down into local conversations. That's in parallel with building up what we'd call a self-serve problem-solving platform that again, process designers, community organizers, people within church communities. Really, democracy in the de Tocqueville sense, as you said, Bill, lives at so many levels, and this is an infrastructure that should be relevant and a culture instead of practices. So if you want to stay in touch with us in any way, you can just send us an email, hello@Bloom Project, and thrilled to be with y'all, and thank you for the time.
Terrific. Thank you, Rahmin, and thank you, Clara, and thank you, everybody, for the discussion so far. I want to test out a spontaneous panel that includes the following: Sarah Bonk, Samantha Alexis Michelle Shireman, Walt, and Gary, because each of them has something to add here. And I don't know if we can do this in a conversational way or not, because we're running short of time. But Sarah, I would love to hear from you. What is the business role? Sarah is Business for America and a leader in this movement. Has taken on the challenge of business's role in saving democracy. And Sarah, what can you add quickly to the discussion?
Well, really quickly, I would just add we're currently in the process of exploring what it might look like for businesses to support things like citizen assemblies and what their role could be. So, in the interest of keeping things brief, maybe I should say would love to have a conversation about that with anybody that is interested in bringing business into the fold. We're hoping in time that we can operate at scale and connecting businesses around the country with opportunities around the country. We're not there yet, so open the conversation.
I think there may be some opportunities we should talk about in the Circle campaign, where we have policy, we have markets, and we also have culture and community. And I think that from my experience, companies are more likely to join if they feel that the issue is not just democracy. They're nervous about getting involved in something that's directly democracy, but if it's something that is very relevant to their business. So we can talk about that.
Yep. Our next campaign, actually, we don't even need to mention the word democracy. So talking more about the principles of the country. So yeah, happy to share more in the future.
Samantha, the namesake of Alexis de Tocqueville, tell us about Frankly, the progress that you're making on Frankly with Harvard, and also the roundtable on political violence.
Absolutely. So let's see. I know we're short for time. I have a deck that might help speed things along. And I promise I will keep it short and sweet. But let's see. So for those who don't know, I'm Sam Shireman. I'm the product manager for Frankly. So Frankly is an open source platform for synchronous video-based dialogue and deliberation. And we're within Harvard's Applied Social Media Lab and working with Larry Lessig, who a lot of the folks here know. So it's essentially a platform for the times where you would ideally want to get people together in person. But that's, of course, extremely expensive and difficult to scale. So we're working on making those sorts of use cases where you have a more structured dialogue or deliberation or conversation that needs to happen, and allow people to move that online. So the idea here is to make the practice of constructive dialogue a heck of a lot more scalable and normal, honestly, to like help people build that muscle of everyday democratic and civic engagement. So to do that, it has to be accessible, adaptable, and scalable. We do that by having the discussion guide directly embedded into the platform, algorithmic group matching. So instead of sending folks randomly to breakout rooms, you can actually make sure that multiple perspectives are represented in those breakout rooms. Participation nudges for if folks are really taking over the conversation or not sharing their perspective. We've got little private nudges to encourage more equal, balanced participation. Deliberative polling tools directly integrated into the platform. And of course, we are open source. We're very much building this with the idea that it is democratic infrastructure. And for that reason, it is absolutely vital that we actually get to build it democratically. And open source allows us to do that. I loved Rahmin talking so much about Audrey Tang. She was actually our first open source contributor, which was pretty cool. So she helped build out our internationalization so you can actually translate the platform. So we're in closed beta. I think a lot of the folks on this call right now have already joined the closed beta. If anyone else is interested, can reach out. We're at hello@frankly.org. And we're working on making it better so that we can transition out of closed beta. We're working on just making it more intuitive to use and better for mobile and things like that. But it is functional in its current form. And we had a recent pilot a couple of weeks ago. So All Sides, who I actually worked for previously, they made a branch of Frankly and ran an event on it. So it's co-hosted by Newsweek and All Sides. They got over 600 participants. The conversation guide was from Living Room Conversations. Shout out to Joan Blades on this call. And it had like marked improvements in pluralistic norms and personal agency. And there are going to be more of those to come. So this was sort of their kickoff event. And then super quick shout out, we're doing the first Frankly Forum tomorrow. I'll share a link to these slides so you guys can have the link directly to this. But 10 a.m. Pacific tomorrow, 1 p.m. Eastern. This is going to be our first of a monthly series hosted on Frankly, where folks can just come and join the Frankly team and ask us questions directly, and so the contributors can come and collaborate and coordinate in real time.
That is great to hear. And I know there's applications of that I'd love to explore for all of the folks that are doing the democracy work that we've heard from today and more, and maybe us too. I'm looking forward to using the Frankly platform. Before I go to Gary Lux, who's going to introduce his new book, and as well as tell us about some session hosting opportunities we'd like you to take advantage of, Walt Roberts, please give us an update on one of the finest groups, I think, in this field, Braver Angels.
Well, this is probably not public knowledge, but what's coming is that Braver Angels has been transforming from being just about crossing, red-blue divides to how to move towards solutions and a more sort of proactivism kind of way of doing things. In 2026, very close to the time in the middle of the summer, they'll be hosting their conference. And building up to that and during the conference, they will be building a declaration for interdependence. So when it comes to reconstituting and renewing the U.S., culture and political economy and democracy, having that group, and this goes to your question earlier, Bill, about how do you engage MAGA? And well, Braver Angels does. That's where it is happening. So MAGA people of all stripes can find a place to feel appreciated and honored regardless of their ideology and how they're stereotyped. So the Declaration of Interdependence and what comes from their exercise is going to be significant for the whole field. So I just wanted to call that to everyone's attention. Pay attention to that, be supportive of that. The other thing I just want to say on the sort of dark side is that this civil society community that we are part of and called out specifically was In This Together and some other entities. And so the alt-right influencer intimidation industrial complex is now taking target on civil society being the deep state. So I'm having to wake up to the fact that one of my Zoom call screens like this showed up on X, and we're being called out as the deep state that's about to overthrow the Trump administration. So it's coming, and just so you know, I'm going to not be cowed by that, but I just wanted to say that. And then a shout out to Paul Zeitz. So he has catalyzed with others an effort that's underway, and it's not fully formulated, but we're trying to create a democracy renewal strategy and a forum for that, and a new forum that connects the ecosystem of players around the intersection of deliberative democracy, the kinds of things being talked about here, the constitutional amendments, and other structural and political reform things. So stay tuned. There will be something that some of you will be invited to in early December, but we hope to see if this is a forum that can bring more people together to do the ecosystem alignment around all these good things that Rahmin and others are doing. So thanks for the time.
It is good news that we're being targeted, because as we become more influential and we actually begin to make a difference, we are going to be targeted because we are threatening some pretty major players, and it's not just in that mega community. So good news to hear. And our need is to maintain our heads as we become targeted. It's very easy to move into panic mode and to violate our own principles as this happens. But we have a small community of folks that are going to try to manipulate a large community of folks to be against civic engagement and democracy. Let's remember that we have some odd bedfellows. You know, if the most credible authoritarian movement on the ostensible political right are the dark MAGA folks, the broligarchs that Steve Bannon is attacking, then Steve Bannon becomes an ally in that respect. There may be
Marjorie Taylor Greene, for crying out loud. My goodness.
Yeah. So let's continue to differentiate our enemy and dive in and avoid the stereotypes, and we'll find that we have a lot more allies than we realize, and we can earn more allies as well. Gary Lux, you're coming out with a new book. I want you to lay that out. You know, people, if you buy these books early on, Amazon takes notice and promotes them more and sells them more. So, Gary, let's hear about your book. And then Gary has a great idea that we'll dive into further on hosting some events that can broaden our community and raise funds to do the work that we're doing. So, Gary?
Thank you, Bill. So my day job as an environmental lawyer, but my second job is leading a indivisible group, and we've been at it for about 9 years. And my publishers on here, Carmen Berry as well, New York Times bestseller. And so I wrote this first book on what people can do, because if you look at someone going to a protest, so many people are immobilized and defeated and don't know what to do. And if you ask 100 people going to a protest what they'll do next, other than posting their pictures on Facebook, they won't have an answer for you. So this book is about what you can do and lessons learned and success stories from our indivisible group. And one of the projects I'll share with you in a moment is how we raise money for democracy and the pro-democracy movement. The second book is underway, and it's You Are the Power to Win the Future, a call to action. And so this is a book I'm working on. I'll put some information in the chat about that. And it's how we move from here to the midterms. It's probably, as you know, such a consequential election, and it requires that people engage and be part of the solution. And so many people are lost and looking for how they can lean in to opportunities. And one of the opportunities I'll share with you in a moment is how we raise money for the pro-democracy movement. And essentially this forthcoming book will focus on, if you're in a purple, blue, or red district, what you can do for the pro-democracy movement, and how you can expand the funnel of people getting engaged, and also raising money and so on. So let me just see if I can get my slide deck up here to talk about the Parties for Democracy, which I think is going to be right here. Do you see this screen, or do you see something else?
Yeah.
Okay,
well,
good.
it's easy. It's fun. I'm here to assist.
Let me Okay, do you see this slide here? Parties for Democracy?
Yep.
Okay, great. So in 2020, we raised about $450,000 in 3 months. It was an opportunity to turn out the vote, and we had 6 months of planning for a big concert with Bonnie Raitt and David Crosby, and 6 months of planning went out the window with COVID. And so instead of a face-to-face concert to raise money and activate people for the 2020 election, we morphed into Zoom parties, which it's not rocket science, but it's just an underutilized strategy. And a small investment of 3 to 4 hours yields about $8,000 to $10,000 per party host. So we had countless party hosts that collectively raised about $500,000 in 3 months in 2020. And essentially, we were focused on Parties for Democracy. It was originally called birthday bundling. You could host a party with your network of friends and activate them and educate them on where they can direct their funds to make a difference. And so we basically have a toolkit that I can make available to all of you. And it's basically like, for example, for my birthday, which was my theme, you could do an anniversary, a half birthday, co-present with 2 people for an anniversary or whatever. And the theme is to bring your friends and community together, most of whom don't really know as much as you do about where and how you can make a difference. And so the theme can be for pro-democracy for the election. And I raised about $20,000 in an hour for my birthday a year ago. And on average, it's $8,000 to $10,000. What we do is we identified organizations, anywhere from Headcount that registers voters at concerts, to the Lincoln Project, to Activate America, or it can also be for In This Together. And so the host gets to decide from this menu of organizations where they want to donate their money. And we have QR codes and links for where you can do it. And these are this is the menu of organizations. And then you have a run of show. Ideally you have a guest speaker to promote the importance and the urgency of the moment with, the most consequential election ahead. And you basically give people the choice of which organization to support. It could be, In This Together or Lincoln Project, or name one that you care about that will move the needle in the upcoming election. And then people will basically make their pledges online. And, as I said, $8,000 to $10,000 per per 1 hour Zoom party. And then you're bringing your friends and community together across the country. Essentially, if you do a face-to-face birthday party or something like that, you ask for RSVPs. A lot of people can't make it because of conflicts. But at 5 o'clock on a Thursday in California, you can invite people across the country. It might be 8 o'clock their time on the East Coast, but you can gather more people in 1 hour for something they care about. And it's a huge opportunity that is not a heavy lift. And we've got a toolkit on saving the date, sample thank you note, and so on. And I'll put the information in the chat on essentially how you can do one of these parties for democracy. But essentially, it's a real critical time, and it's an opportunity. If we just raised $500,000 in just this short 3-month window with our indivisible group of 1,000 volunteers,
yeah,
there are 2,700 indivisible groups across the country, and all of your organizations. So I'll leave it to Bill to take to the next step.
And at the same time, we are raising money. We are also gathering people in these discussions about deliberative processes, and we are growing our movement. So I think this is a great system to expand beyond where it's been so far. And I thank Gary for really driving this home to us and for his leadership in developing this system. We're going to give everybody an opportunity to consider whether you want to host a meeting, a party, or contribute your network of folks to potentially participate in a party to raise funds for some of the projects that we have been featuring today and will feature otherwise. It will be, I think, an excellent opportunity for us to grow in 2026. It's beginning to look like 2026 to 2028 are our defining years as a movement. We're going to find out whether there's a third term attempt during that time or a broligarchy attempt during that time. And there will be opportunities to engage. This has been about the most packed leadership circle call that I can remember now, right up against the final minute. Generally, we had hoped to have a discussion here about, with all of the featured folks, about what we can do together to avoid this authoritarian, totalitarian temptation that we are facing right now. We're going to continue informally, starting right about now, with anybody who wants to hang on and talk about whatever you like, including how we can collaborate to take this the next step. My disappointment with past efforts to bring Americans together is that they have not captured media for the most part, because they don't fit into either the red or the blue. So one of our challenges and opportunities is, how do we do that this time? And one of the things that I'll be exploring. Thank you, everybody, for joining. If you need to move on, please do, with our blessing. If you'd like to hang on for a few more minutes to shoot the breeze, as they say, we welcome you.